Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back the Honorable Bruce Andrews, Deputy Secretary of Commerce of the United States, to moderate an armchair discussion on investing in advanced manufacturing with Mr. Pete Selleck, Chairman and President of Michelin North America, and Mr. Ludwig Willisch, President and CEO of BMW North America.
Hello again, and I'm excited to be here to talk about one of my favorite topics, investing in advanced manufacturing. From day one, manufacturing has been a top priority for President Obama and this administration. We have been laser focused on expanding this important part of our economy. And as a result, in many ways, today is the best time in years for U.S. manufacturing. I started working at Ford Motor Company in 2007 during one of the worst times in the history of the auto industry. Ford, along with other great American auto giants, were facing serious challenges. I remember Alan Mulally saying, "Ford has been going out of business for 62 years and we have to turn that around." And he was right, and we did. Ford and the auto industry slowly but surely became great examples of the broader comeback in American manufacturing. Today, the American manufacturing industry is on the rise, and America's manufacturers are as competitive as ever. Since February 2010, manufacturing has added more than 800,000 quality jobs, the fastest pace of growth since the 1990s. And for the first time since 1999, the number of factories is increasing. Make no mistake, the renaissance of American manufacturing is underway. The revitalization is real, and the results are tangible. Manufacturing is a growing segment of the economy. Indeed, U.S. manufacturing comprises 12.5% of our gross domestic product, and it's growing at twice the rate of GDP as a whole. This morning, we're going to hear from two companies who have weathered the storm and are reaping the benefits of America's manufacturing resurgence. Pete Selleck is Chairman and President of Michelin North America. He's been with Michelin since 1982, and today he oversees all of the company's North American operations, which consist of 19 manufacturing plants and 22,000 employees. Our second panelist is Ludwig Willisch, President and Chief Executive Officer of BMW North America. Before moving into his current position, he oversaw BMW's European sales operation. Both companies have operated in the United States for decades. They've seen manufacturing in the United States go through periods where production investment has stagnated and are now part of its resurgence. So, gentlemen, I would like to start by asking about your initial decision to invest in the United States. What were the opportunities and challenges you faced? Pete, let me begin with you. Can you talk about that and why Michelin has continued to invest in the United States again and again?
Well, Michelin arrived in the United States back in the mid-'70s, and what drove us here was technology. We had invented the radial tire back in the 40s and the 50s. That technology had already spread through Europe, and there was a little bit of a resistance to the technology because it was very expensive to modify plants, so Michelin dove in. Fortunately, we had a number of customers that were very interested, particularly in the OE world. They were interested in the technology. So we jumped in and we decided to build our first plants in the state of South Carolina. We were one of the first automotive industry players to move into the Southeast. In large part, we were motivated by the fact that the region in the upstate of South Carolina at the time was going through a transition because the textile industry was basically offshoring at that time. And the company recognized that the type of manufacturing that we do is similar to textile manufacturing in terms of the demands that we make on our employees. So the first generation of Michelin employees were in fact former textile workers, and they have done marvelously. So we've actually gone through, since the creation of Michelin in South Carolina in the early 70s, we've had two subsequent kind of growth spurts. One was in the mid-90s when we started building mining tire capacity. And today, we have two large plants in South Carolina that make mining tires. 80% of what we make is exported. So we're using the United States as a base for exporting mining tires to the rest of the world. So that was 20 years ago, and right now we're still in the process of building plants. We've actually opened up 2 new plants in the last 3 years, so it's been a great success for us.
Ludwig.
Well, initially we had the plan, but it was only a plan to enlarge our footprint as far as production is concerned. But that was in the late 80s. And then we were actually proactively approached by someone from the Commerce Department of the state of South Carolina, it was actually from Spartanburg, and said, why don't you move and have a plant? We only had plants in Germany, to be precise, only in Bavaria. Well, we said, we'll give it a shot, we'll think about it. And then we looked at it closer, and there was land available. And if you not only produce locally, but also want to export, and actually right now we are the biggest car exporter in the United States, you may have to make sure that the logistics works both ways. So you need a port, you need the connection between the port and the plant. That worked out initially with the I-85 from Port Charleston. Now we rail all the stuff back and forth, and we have an inland port, 200 miles inland at Greer, South Carolina. And one of the more decisive points was, too, that there was a pool of skilled workers to begin with. There was an infrastructure of technical schools which we could build on. And after all, well, also we found, and that really impressed us to begin with, we found it impressing that the state of South Carolina actually approached us in Germany and said, come on over, we'll show you how to have an excellent location for a plant. And so we started quite humbly in 1992 with a plant that was meant to build 100,000 cars one fine day, and we now soon be the biggest plant of BMW in South Carolina with 450,000 cars. We've started with 600 million investment. Now we have invested 7 billion so far. We'll invest another billion in the next year. So then we have a capacity of 450,000 cars, and this is, ladies and gentlemen, perfect timing. Today we build our 3 millionth car in South Carolina.
Both of your companies have been in the United States for a long time. From your current perspective, or from your perspective, what does the current picture look like on the ground? And what advice would you have for companies who are currently considering investing in the United States? And Ludwig, why don't we start with you?
Well, especially if you want to export, free trade is the name of the game. So that's why TTIP becomes so important. This will just foster demand. It's just something that you don't like if you're producing is import taxes, duties, different standards and all that. It just costs money. There's no benefit to society, no benefit to anyone. Then you need to have a skilled workforce, or you need an infrastructure for skilled workforce. Of course, you need a pro-business environment, and last but not least, the United States needs to make sure that energy prices are kept low, which means the United States really has to look into staying independent as far as energy is concerned.
Well, obviously, it's been remarkable to watch the U.S. economy come back from the crisis of 2008, 2009. I was working for Michelin in Europe, running the truck tire business globally at the time, and I was just back in Europe last week, and it's really quite remarkable to understand that when you look at new car purchasing, Europe is still running 20% below the level that they were at before the crisis, whereas the United States is now back up to the same level before the crisis. So there's been an adaptability of the economy here, which has been absolutely remarkable. And certainly the indicators today in the economy are very promising. It's a good time to be in this country. But looking forward, I think we need to constantly be looking out 10 years, 20 years, and trying to anticipate what's coming. I agree completely with Ludwig that anything we can do to reduce barriers to trade is something that's extremely necessary, particularly for companies like ours that want to use the United States as a manufacturing base. So that's one thing. And then as Secretary Liu mentioned, I spend a lot of time unfortunately, working on tax issues because the tax rate, the more we're profitable in North America, the more that's detrimental to Group Michelin because of the relatively high corporate tax rate of the United States compared to the rest of the world. So, that's not an easy problem to solve. Everybody says we need to lower corporate tax rates. Obviously, both of us would be in favor of that. But to do that, obviously, there needs to be a complete look at the federal fiscal situation, whether it's the tax code, whether it's the entitlement system, whether it's discretionary spending. There are solutions to that. I mean, that's been looked at by Simpson Bowles. It's been looked at by a lot of different people. But the country's ability to resolve those, if we were successful, would put the United States on an economic trajectory over the next 20 years that would be unbeatable.
Thank you.
Just one little comment. The auto industry may be back to pre-crisis level. We are way beyond that. So I really want to spread some confidence here that it is possible to do. I think we're 30% above pre-crisis level.
Interesting. Okay. Together, collectively, you both have decades of experience, global experience in manufacturing, and you've worked in manufacturing powerhouses like Germany and Japan and France. Based on your experience, why do you think the United States is an attractive place to invest? And I guess conversely, what do you think we have to learn from other countries?
Well, obviously, the adaptability of the American culture is probably the most remarkable aspect to it. There simply are not the barriers to change that exist in many other parts of the world. Certainly, we struggle with that in Europe. We struggle with that in other parts of the world. There are certainly issues here as well, but the United States has had a very solid mechanism to adapt very quickly. So, one of the big challenges that's facing this country in particular is workforce development. It's education. When I started at Michelin over 30 years ago, we could hire, and we did in fact have some people in our facilities that could not read and write. Today, that's not even possible. Today, when we go through the hiring process, we don't just accept diplomas. We actually test for literacy. We test for math skills. We test for problem solving. We test for teamwork skills. And then after all that, we look at police records. We look at we get drug tests, and ultimately we go on Facebook. And it's amazing what you find out about people on Facebook. But the process to get in as a production worker at Michelin today is extremely rigorous, which basically means that if you do not succeed in the American education system today, back 30, 40 years ago, you could either go into industry or you could go into agriculture. Today, you can't work at a BMW plant or you can't work at a Michelin plant. So we've got to look not just at technical training at the high end, but we also have to look at how elementary school education works. We've got to look at third grade reading levels. We actually have 400 of our employees that on a regular basis are going into Title I elementary schools and helping the local educators just one-on-one reading with young first, second, third graders. That's crucial, and that's a big problem in our society. And if we don't get on top of that fairly soon, I think 20 years from now, we're going to have a major problem.
I couldn't agree more with you, Pete. It really is crucial that we team up with the universities, that we have these programs. We start to copy what we have in Germany, the scholar programs, which is sort of an apprentice program where workers work at our plant, but also go to school at the same time. We help with tuition and books, but that way we make sure that we have skilled workers. And it's absolutely right. The more sophisticated our plants go, nobody works on an assembly line today and just does one thing. You do need skilled workforce, and this is what is our challenge.
Well, and that's a good segue, because both of your companies have been real leaders in developing skills and access to talent. Could you just dig a little deeper and tell us a little more about the kind of partnerships that you've done in the training and what's been effective for you in terms of building that skilled workforce to work in your plants?
Well, first of all, we have a lot of partnerships with a lot of universities. We have this scholar program, but we also team up with Clemson University. I think the two companies do, and we started with, just as Michelin, with partnering up with the Institute of Automotive Research, and started a program to attract the best and brightest in the United States to join a curriculum that we developed together. We started with an endowment of 10 million in 2002, I believe, in order to make sure that the facilities we're up to speed, and also then to make sure that once we've attracted these people, we can also offer them an international career. This is important, that you're not limited, if you don't want to, not limited to the plant in Spartanburg, but make sure that these people have a career path throughout the United States or even overseas within the corporation.
One of the most critical skills at Michelin are the reliability technicians. These are the people that maintain, install, set up our production equipment. We have a similar Tech Scholar program. As a matter of fact, BMW and Michelin have sort of been comparing notes on this over the years. And what we do today is we go into not only to tech schools, our technical colleges, during the first couple of weeks of the first semester, but we also are now going into high schools, and we're identifying promising young students. We're providing them full scholarships. We pay for their books. We provide them 20-hour-a-week internships working for us, paid about $15 an hour. And then when they graduate 2 years later, 95% of them come to work for us. They start at $50,000 a year, no debt, money in their pocket. And that's the formula that's working. And in addition, because of that, we also work with the technical colleges along with BMW to tell them this is the curriculum we need. This is where we need for these students to be when they graduate from technical school, so that when we take them into our training program, and we have a subsequent training program that they work on over the next 4 years to get them up to the skill level where they need to be. But that's been a huge success. It was based on a technical college system that was put in place in South Carolina in the 1960s, and companies like BMW and Michelin have really been pushing the state and the local technical colleges to continue to up their game.
Great. Ludwig, you made reference to the partnership with Clemson University,
Yes.
and the unique ecosystem of innovation that exists in South Carolina. Could you just talk to us a little bit of how you've partnered with universities on R&D, and what else you've been doing to invest in R&D here in America?
Well, first of all, we try to develop young engineers, young technicians beyond their specific skills, which means we try to team up to develop them in the sense that they are knowledgeable about anything from material selection to system integration, and make sure that we have people that we can use for different necessities, for different tasks. And the research and development as such is done now at the universities, but we have part of research and development in our California Tech office, which is, so to say, an arm of our R&D department in Germany, meaning that we like to pick up the latest knowledge and the latest development in the Silicon Valley. And otherwise, we will have people also from the United States send over to Germany, and we work closely together with them there. So it's, so to say, you could call it almost a universal approach.
Interesting. Pete?
We have a large research and development activity in this country and also in South Carolina. We work in partnership with Clemson, with other universities, to work on just some interesting technologies we're working on right now. Probably the most significant are technologies that improve fuel economy and help cars reduce emissions. A tire on a BMW consumes about 20% of the fuel that the BMW uses through what's called rolling resistance.
Yes.
Otherwise put, if your car had steel wheels, if a BMW had steel wheels, it would get 20% better fuel economy, with some disadvantages.
With some,
It would never stop, or it'd be very uncomfortable. And
the ride would also be a little rough,
It
right?
would not be a great car. So anyhow, pneumatic tires make sense, but there are technologies today that we have and are putting into place that improve the fuel efficiency, and that's very important. The second is that you all may notice on 18-wheelers going down the roads, you may notice that some of them no longer just have dual tires. Some of them now have wide single tires that have replaced the dual tires. That makes the ease of maintenance of the vehicle much better. It improves fuel economy. It also allows the truck to carry about 1,000 pounds more load. So there's a productivity factor involved there. And then finally, we've actually developed here in the United States, we developed a technology called the Tweel, which is an airless tire which we're now actually marketing in 2 applications, one for skid steer loaders on construction sites, the other on commercial lawnmowers. And these are tires that simply cannot get flat tires. There's no air in them. These are applications where people get more than 1 flat tire every week. So we're pushing that technology through our R&D center, and also we've just opened a small manufacturing plant. So really there is a lot of technology in our company that's being developed right here in the United States.
Thank you. It's interesting that both of your companies started out in South Carolina and have expanded your operations there. How have the states, and we have a number of state and local governments represented here, how have the state and local governments worked with you to provide customized services? Maybe Ludwig will start.
Well, first of all, we're always looking at infrastructure, which we've obviously have enjoyed as far as South Carolina is concerned. We also need the infrastructure in terms of schooling, in terms of teaching, where it's a give and take just as much. We'll also see if we employ like 8,000 people in the plant in South Carolina, we're looking for tax breaks. I mean, if we cater to jobs, I think it's just fair enough to look for that, and then of course also see what we can do on property taxes. So it's a combination of it, but the real crucial thing is the 2 infrastructural components. One is the logistics, that you need to have rail, you have to have a port, you have to have like the I-85, you have to have the highway to transport goods, and you need to have a skilled workforce, and that was both available to begin with in South Carolina. We actually looked at one point in time only at one other location, which would be further out west, to cater to both sides of the country, but in the end, you know, this decision was in favor of Spartanburg.
Unlike BMW, who's the only car manufacturer in the state of South Carolina, we're now one of 4 tire manufacturers in the state. Since we've arrived, we've had 3 competitors arrive. Fortunately, we're all strategically placed around the state, so we're not too close to each other. But I agree with Ludwig in terms of what the needs are. A lot of people think this is just a tax incentive game, and certainly making sure the tax structure is correct is important. But truly, first of all, having sites that you can build on are important. You've got to have sites that, you know, that are large enough, that have the right terrain, that you can permit rapidly enough, and that you get help from the state in getting all the permits necessary. So that's very important. Certainly the transportation links, and I really want to emphasize 2 things. One, ports are really important, and Secretary Lew talked about it. The deepening of U.S. ports, the deepening of the harbors to get down to 52 feet to be able to handle these post-Panamax container ships is crucial, because you know, the amount of exporting we're doing, and we also import most of our natural rubber. So there's a lot of flow going in and out of ports, which is very important for our business. And also on the infrastructure, again, the road system, the interstate highway system in this country was built in the 50s and the 60s, and it's really showing its age. And we really need a lot of focus put on making sure that roads, bridges, the entire infrastructure is basically refurbished. It's politically difficult, but it's absolutely necessary, and we need to be doing the things today that 10 years from now are going to pay off for us. And then, of course, another aspect, as we've said already, is workforce development. You've got to have the people to be able to operate your facilities.
And so we're represented here. Downstairs we have 44 states and Puerto Rico exhibiting. We've got all 50 states and the territories represented here. Let me ask you this question. What advice would you give to those states and local governments? And you mentioned some of the things, but what advice would you give to them about attracting investment, and frankly attracting companies like yours to come to their regions?
I think what's been successful for the upstate of South Carolina was that the region had a strategy. It didn't just happen. Yeah. It did not happen. The leaders of the region back in the late 60s, seeing the decline of the textile industry, said, look, we have to do something about this and we need to be proactive. So they actually defined a strategy saying, what can we do to become the most attractive place for foreign companies to invest in the United States? That was exactly the question that they asked. And they came up with a strategy that included the technical college system. It included a modern airport, the Greenville-Spartanburg Airport, and then it also included a very aggressive recruiting program. So they went out and started recruiting. But and right now there are 230 foreign-owned companies whose North American headquarters are within 50 miles of Greenville, South Carolina. It's the region with the highest percentage of foreign direct investment, I believe, in the country. But again, I insist it was not a one afternoon event. It was a defined strategy that they worked out over the years, and it took them about 5 years before Michelin took the hook, and then it was about 19 years later that BMW came in, but it's a very, very long process, but you need to have a strategy.
Ludwig?
Well, it didn't take us 5 years, I can tell you. I think it was remarkable that someone representing the state of South Carolina actually met our then chairman, Ebert von Kuhnheim, in Berlin at a political event. Was pretty sure he would be there. This was in context of the reunification of Germany, and said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And Mr. von Kuhnheim said, "Yes, I give you 5 minutes, literally." And he said, "We have land, we have a port, we have a highway, we have skilled workforce. Why don't you come to South Carolina?" And he said, "Okay, you convinced me. Talk to this gentleman who is in charge of production." And 2 years later, we broke ground. So it really is to have a convincing proposal.
Good. Well, let me ask you this question. So we started out talking about what drove your first decisions. I want to end by sort of looking forward, which is, manufacturing is going to change a lot over the next decade. And how can the United States position itself to be an attractive place for companies to continue investing for the next 10 years and going forward?
Well, we're always looking for sustainable growth. So it's not only today, if you're in the business of premium mobility, that you can say, well, design, safety, performance, that's what is crucial. What's crucial for our customers today is that you act responsibly, and that's financially, that's socially, that's environmentally. And if the United States can help us meeting these targets that we are convincing, for example, if you look at our plant in Moses Lake, Washington, where we build carbon fiber for our electric cars, and now also for our new 7 Series that's coming, with hydropower. So obviously to produce carbon fiber as a material instead of steel uses a lot of electricity, but if you can do that with the likes of hydropower, so fully sustainably, that's great. I mean, that's really something that people are looking for, and it's the new aspect of premium. And if the United States can help us with that, just as much as we've talked before about the infrastructural things, that would be very, very helpful.
Our industry has an interesting challenge. I'm the chairman of our industry's trade association of the 8 manufacturers that make tires here in the United States, and our trade association is in favor and is advocating regulation relating to the rolling resistance or the fuel economy of tires, as well as the wet braking capability, the safety of tires. The United States is the only major developed country in the world today that does not have thresholds for minimum levels of fuel economy or wet braking capability of tires. Other countries have been placing them in gradually over the last 10 years, and today the United States has sort of become the dumping ground for those manufacturers offshore that simply don't have the technology and cannot sell their products now in other parts of the world. So that's a challenge facing companies that have technology and want to sell environmentally sound and safe tires. So we're actually advocating for regulation, and we're having a little bit of trouble today getting people to take us seriously, that we really think it's in the interest of developing the American economy and improving environment and safety.
Good. Well, so closing thoughts. What other advice would you offer this crowd where we have investors from around the world, we have companies, we have individual investors? What else should they know as they think about making their decisions? Or frankly, what else would you say are compelling reasons why they should be considering investing in the United States?
Well, I think one thing that both of our companies and other companies that are here are willing to do, and that is to talk with other companies, other foreign companies that are considering making this investment. We're probably the best ambassadors based on what's happened to us for people to talk to. So if there are people that are trying to court and make those relationships, give us a call, give our companies a call, give other companies that have invested here in the United States a call, and let us tell our story. We'll explain the good things, we'll explain the bad things, we'll give a balanced view. But obviously, people will see through our actions, the investments that we're making today, that we see the positive aspects of investing more here in the United States.
Well, if you just look at the fact that 20 years ago, our plant in Spartanburg was the smallest plant we had, and now by next year it's going to be the biggest plant on the planet in the BMW universe. That speaks more than 1,000 words. It really makes sense to be here. It's the pro-business attitude that the state of South Carolina has, and I can only encourage everyone, except for, of course, make free trade happen, to be pro-business, because it helps to cater to jobs. It helps to have a healthy environment. If you look at the cities around our plants today, how they have prospered over the years. If you had been there 20 years ago, and if you look there today, it's just impressive how this whole region has grown and has become a very happy, wealthy community.
Well, good. Well, yesterday, President Obama was here talking about trade and talking about both the Trade Promotion Authority legislation in Congress, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership, and that's something we were very focused on as an administration, because we recognize that there are a lot of good things in place right now, but we want to take that next step and that next generation to make America an even stronger place, both to manufacture, but also to export and to do business. I can't tell you how much we have enjoyed hearing your stories and appreciate the opportunity to hear about the great things that your companies have been doing. And on behalf of the Department of Commerce, we appreciate the investments that you've made in the United States, both now, but also in the future. And thank you for being here today with us to share your experiences.
Our pleasure.